Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your participation. This is such an enormous issue. Councilor Oliver and I would like to start by actually reading the ordinance that we're learning about this evening. So we thought we would read that out loud. We are on Channel 16. This will be broadcasted and tomorrow, and then available on demand thereafter. So we'll get this just on camera.
Yes.
Councilor?
Thank you very much. I am William Oliver. I represent the 9th District, which is partly contagious for where the red line is proposed to travel through, mainly down College. I got with my fellow councilor, Mr. Fanning here, and we decided to put on this town hall meeting. What brought this about is what the Indiana General Assembly allowed the city of Indianapolis to do, as well as the other surrounding counties, and that is put it on the agenda. And this is what we voted on as a council. This is the authority that the Indiana General Assembly gave us, and we took that authority, we voted on it, and we put it in the hands of you, the taxpayers and users. And that's why we're here this evening, to learn more about what we voted on for clarification, so we'll know how to vote in November, okay? So I'm going to try to read this as best I can. Listen acutely, because this whole thing is put on because of this ordinance that was passed by the council. So I will proceed. This is proposal number 145. Whereas the Indianapolis Public Transportation Corporation, known as IPTC, is a municipal corporation and public transportation corporation providing public transit services within the city of Indianapolis and Marion County. Whereas the Indy Connect Plan, the multi-county transit vision for Central Indiana, as developed by the Metropolitan Planning Organization in partnership with the IPTC and the Central Indiana Regional Transportation Authority, is based on years of planning and public input and calls for regional public transportation and improvement. And whereas enacted by the Indiana General Assembly, provides an opportunity for the citizens of Central Indiana to vote via a referendum in a general election on whether to build a county-based public transportation improvements through an income tax not to exceed 0.25%. And whereas,
Thanks. Whereas IPTC Resolution 2016-02, adopted by the IPTC Board of Directors on February 25th, 2016, supports a voter referendum in Marion County to fund public transportation improvements. And whereas the Marion County Transit Plan begins to implement the Indy Connect Regional Plan with Marion County in accordance with the enabling legislation, and whereas the Marion County Transit Plan offers a 5-year implementation plan for improved travel times with all routes operating 7 days a week, shorter wait times, trips earlier in the morning and later at night, and 3 new rapid transit lines. And whereas the Indianapolis Public Transportation Corporation's Board of Directors is expected to adopt a detailed and comprehensive version of the Marion County Transit Plan on March 24th, 2016, now therefore be it ordained by the City County Council of the City of Indianapolis and Marion County, Indiana. Section 1, pursuant to IC 8-25-2-1, a referendum to fund public transportation improvements in Marion County is hereby authorized and shall be placed on the November 2016 ballot for voters. Section 2, pursuant to IC 8-25-2-3, the referendum question shall read as follows. Shall Marion County have the ability to impose a county economic development income tax rate not to exceed a rate of 0.25% to pay for improving or establishing public transportation service in the county through a public transportation project that will create a connected network of buses and rapid transit lines, increase service frequency, extend operational hours, and implement 3 new rapid transit lines. Section 3, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect upon adoption and in compliance with IC 36-3-4-14. So that's the resolution that was passed at the City Council level. Tonight is all about learning what that plan is, learning the facts behind that plan. I think it's probably safe to say that many of us in this room have not yet made up our mind which way we're going to vote in November, and we need to learn all the facts and details in order to do so. Councilor Oliver and I got lots of questions as to why we aren't having lots of different viewpoints as a panel. We felt very strongly that this should not be a debate. This is just, there will be lots of time for debate and sharing opinions later. We just want to clarify on television, for the record, the actual facts behind the Marion County Transit Plan. So that's what tonight's about. We will have three different presenters, and we will have brief presentations, and then we will welcome your clarifying questions. And I recognize many of you in the audience. Thank you for being here. We ask that when you come to the podium, we'll call on you to come to the podium to ask your question after the presentations. Please state your name clearly and your question for the camera. Depending on the volume of your voice, we might repeat your question, so don't be offended by that. We're just doing it to make sure the camera gets it, because this will be available on demand. And then the appropriate panel expert will answer your question. Lastly, we've got 4 upcoming red line meetings. So tonight is really about what the referendum means. So we're going to focus on the Marion County Transit Plan. If you have very detailed questions about the red line, there are 4 upcoming opportunities still this month to ask those questions, and I believe all of those meetings will be televised? No? Okay, maybe not. Sorry about that, I thought so. But those will be great opportunities to ask granular, detailed questions about the red line. So tonight is all about the referendum. So we'll introduce our panelists. First, we have Mark Fisher from the Indy Chamber. We have Brian Llewellyn from Indigo. We have Sean Northup from the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And to answer questions but not present are Melody Park, from the Department of Public Works, and Bart Brown, the CFO of the City Council. So they can help us with kind of some of the nitty-gritty funding questions and logistics. So with that, Molly, if we could turn off the lights, thank you. We'll get started with our first presentation.
Thank you, Councilor Fanning. Thank you, Councilor Oliver, and thank you all for being with us tonight on a weekday. So thank you very much. Here to talk about the Marion County Transit Plan. This has been a several years long process. It started really back in 2009 with the inception of Indy Connect. It was a discussion with a lot of different partners at that point that kind of went 2 different routes. One route, the private sector partners went to the State House and started discussing funding options once they decided that transit was a need. And then the public sector partners, of which, as Councilor Fanning mentioned, were the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Central Indiana Regional Transportation Authority, and Indigo, started working with the public to craft a very, very comprehensive regional public plan. That plan can be found at the website indyconnect.org. That plan we also have in hard copy, not here tonight, but we'll have it at all those red line meetings. And the summary of that plan is available on the back table there. You're all welcome to grab copies of that one too. So as Councilor Oliver said, what precipitated this were kind of 2 things. First of all, in 2014, the Indiana General Assembly, through Senate Enrolled Act 176, which is now Indiana Code 8-25, authorized an advisory referenda by county for 6 counties in central Indiana to determine whether to dedicate funds to transit. Dedicated funds was the key. That's an issue that Indigo has been grappling with for years, which is the lack of dedicated funding source makes it very, very hard to plan around, and also it makes Indigo's budget, the operating budget for the transit system, subject to the annual operating budget conversation through council. There's a 3-step process that's prescribed in that bill in that Indiana Code 8-25. Step 1 was for council to certify a referendum. That happened in May of this year. It was Proposal 145. Now it's referred to as City County Council Special Ordinance Number 1 for 2016. So that first step is complete. The second step is that the public will have a vote in the general election this November, so at the same time as President and Governor and one of the senators and the entire State House delegation, basically. This will be a question on the ballot countywide for all of Marion County. The other 5 counties that were authorized decided not to go in 2016. It's only Marion County on the ballot this November. Then number 3, if approved by a majority of voters, council may enact a tax. May is underlined because it is an advisory referendum. Council has final authority to say yes or no between that rate of 0.1 and 0.25. So Indigo today has a $70 million operating budget, about 10 million annual trips, 31 routes. They serve the whole county with paratransit service. That's for qualified riders. That's an on-demand service that's branded as Open Door. It's another thing that gets called as dial-a-ride. Basically, you schedule door-to-door service if you are a pre-qualified rider. Right now, the big issue that faces Indigo is that service is very spread thin over a very large county. Service is very, very infrequent. A lot of the buses are old, are beyond what's projected as the useful life of a bus. The reason for that, one, is the overall investment in transit is very low, and then the other part of that is that Indigo is spread very thin over a 400 square mile city. Go ahead. And so by comparison, as the 33rd largest region in the country, Indianapolis ranks 86th in transit service per capita, measured as revenue hours per capita. That's a revenue hour is 1 hour that a bus is available on the street to people. Because it's such a large county, area-wise, that means that service is spread very, very thin, and the majority of riders who take Indigo today are people that do not have another choice. The service is flatly not useful to most people. The IndyConnect plan has been, public process in the plan has been the largest public involvement process in the history of the region. This has been ongoing since 2009. There have been hundreds of public meetings, hundreds of articles covering the process, many visits, many big social media presence. This has been a huge public process. And what we've heard, Brian, next slide, what we've heard again and again are some main themes. The buses need to run earlier and later. That's a big problem, is that one of the ways Indigo has been able to keep more service on the street is by restricting weekend service and by restricting evening service. So one of the knocks has been they can get you to the Pacers game, but they can't get you home. And that's even worse for people that are working the Pacers game. People that are working the service industry downtown cannot get home because hours have been cut very, very short. Also, people that ride the bus typically can't work weekends. That's a big problem that a lot of people that can't afford other ways to get around, it's a big obstacle they run into, is that weekend service is very austere and it's been cut. Buses don't come often enough. This is another one. So most of the network buses come every 30 minutes or every 60 minutes. You have to plan your day around your bus route. Really important things happen when buses start coming every 15 minutes. And that's that people stop checking the schedule and start just going out to the street and anticipating a bus coming soon. The wait is short enough that you no longer have to plan your day around the route. You can just go to the street and use the next one. That gets exacerbated when you're doing a transfer. If you're transferring from a 60-minute route to a 60-minute route, you could have an hour wait just in the middle of your trip, and that's a big disincentive for people to use transit. So the majority of the system today is running very, very infrequent routes, 30-minute or 60-minute. There are only 2 routes that come every 15 minutes. And they're the 2 heaviest used routes on the entire corridor. That's East 38th Street and Meridian Street, and then Washington Street east-west. Shouldn't have to go downtown to transfer. So one of the issues right now is that it's a hub and spoke system. So a lot of folks that want to just go east-west or north-south on different parts of the city have to go downtown to transfer out. Now that's made a lot easier by the opening of the downtown transit center, but if the bus is still coming very infrequently, every half hour or every hour, there's an inherent problem there that just causes transfers to be very, very long. And then don't cut my route. So right now the system is very, very austere. Cutting it even further would be a big, big hardship to a lot of the riders in the county. One of the benefits to waiting so long to invest in transit, and we really have been behind our peers now for at least 20 years. The last big cut with Indigo was 1991, so 25 years ago, was that we've been able to learn best practices from other places. And this is the ridership for recipe. Make no mistake, the majority of Indigo's network today is not designed to attract ridership. It's designed to be available to people that really have no other choice. Most of the system is just by definition not useful to folks. What does useful look like? It kind of has 4 characteristics. One is it runs through density. There are many, many parts of the city that have adequate density to run transit. There are many parts of the city that were built around transit and have a lot of the infrastructure in place to support transit. A lot of those areas do not have adequate transit service today. It's hard to even say that those markets have been tested for transit. Walkability. So presence of sidewalks is a big issue, but there's also a built form issue here, and that's the length of a block is very important. Block lengths that are shorter are inherently more walkable. Number of intersections per square mile. So having a street grid is inherently more walkable than kind of a more suburban sprawling street grid. Continuity, so having things along the way the entire way versus going through big gaps and trying to serve at the other end of those big gaps. All of that mileage in between costs money to serve. That costs service hours and is expensive and inefficient to serve. And then linearity, running routes in a straight line. If you look at the current map for Indigo, there's a lot of routes that wiggle their way through communities. That creates shorter walks for people from their front door to the transit stop, but also very, very slow trips on very infrequent routes, which again is a big disincentive for people riding. Right? So the Marion County Transit Plan has this basic tenets to it. It's a significant improvement to the local bus network. It's a 70% increase in transit service system-wide. That's shorter waits for many, many areas in the system and later hours. There's easier transfers. And then every route would run every day. So there would be longer hours, weekdays and weekends. The same buses would be running the same path 7 days a week at the same frequency. Right now the schedule is very, very confusing, and it takes a lot of the guesswork out of that. And then 3 rapid transit lines along with that. So phase 2 and phase 3 of the red line, the blue line, and the purple line. The blue line is on Washington Street. The purple line would be on Meridian and East 38th Street. The referendum is posted for a 1/4 cent income tax. That's 25 cents for every $100 of income. On that chart, we have household income. The median there updated for 2014 is $42,000. It's about $100 a year at the median income. At higher incomes, it's more. At lower incomes, it's less. It's a flat 0.25%. And then when you go lower than $20,000, tax impacts get very, very difficult. If people are on Social Security, if they're on after-tax fixed income, they likely will not be paying into this tax system. This is flat, and it's based on income. If approved, and if nothing else were to change with the 100 largest regions in the country, we would move from 86th up to 65th. So it is an improvement. It's certainly not a Cadillac plan. It doesn't move us into the top 50 in terms of 100 largest cities. And again, we're 33rd largest. And this is the language that would be on the ballot. So the language that's in black is prescribed in state ordinance. Shall Marion County have the ability to impose a county economic development income tax rate not to exceed a rate of 0.25% to pay for improving or establishing public transportation service in the county through a public transportation project. And then what's in red is the description of the project. That will create a connected network of buses and rapid transit lines, increase service frequency, extend operational hours, and implement 3 new rapid transit lines. Brian's going to come up and talk about those clauses at the end of the language here and exactly how those describe the plan.
Thank you, Sean.
Good evening. I'm Brian Llewellyn, Director of Public Affairs for Indigo. Thanks for taking some time out of your evening to learn about things that are going on in your city. So this ballot question is pretty complex. It's a lot of legal language that was prescribed, and we had to be as concise as possible with what the proposal is in a few words. So here we're going to attempt to break that down a little bit. In the back, there are these handouts with lots of detailed information. There's a map inside that you can see up close. It's the map up here on the screen. The map on the left is the system that we're operating today. Sean talked about service frequency, how often the bus is coming. These lines on the map are color-coded so that you know how often the bus is coming throughout the city. Green lines are routes that are operating every 60 minutes. That's 1 bus every hour. Blue lines are operating every 30 minutes, and red lines, those 2 frequent routes that Sean mentioned, the Washington Street corridor and the North Meridian East 38th Street line, the 39. Those are the 2 lines that Indigo operates today that are 15-minute routes. Those are highly dependable, they're frequent, and if your schedule flexes a little bit in the middle of the day, you can still depend on it to get to work. On the right is the Marion County Transit Plan proposal for what we could build with a 0.25% income tax in 5 years. So the language that corresponds to the plan is a connected network of buses and rapid transit lines with increased service frequency. So you can see the color of the map changes significantly. On the left, there's a lot of green lines with hourly service. On the right, there are significantly more red lines, and those are frequent local lines, not the red line rapid transit, but regular local service operating at a high frequency. The structure of the service is significantly different. You can see on the left, Sean mentioned the hub and spoke system where it forces everybody downtown for a majority of trips. On the right-hand side, the service structure is very different, and it begins to emerge more like a grid. So that if you're driving, you don't make a U-shaped trip. You generally make an L-shaped trip to complete your pattern. Straight lines connecting folks with the destinations that they're going to most frequently. Sean also talked about hours of service. The colors on this chart mean the same thing. So the blue lines are every 30 minutes, the green lines are every hour, the red lines are every 15 minutes. This is also in the handout, so I'd urge you to grab one of these. And then the span of service. We talk about buses earlier in the morning and later at night. So this chart, the span left to right, shows how many hours a day the bus is operating on weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. So the current system is on the top, the new system is on the bottom. So with expanded operational hours, these routes would start earlier in the morning, they would run more frequent all day, and they would end later at night. And 3 new rapid transit lines. So on the map in your handout, the fat red lines are the rapid transit lines, and that's where there's some significant infrastructure, dedicated lanes in some areas, stations that speed the boarding process, where payment is handled off board, and there are more amenities along the line. And throughout the plan, the red, blue, and purple line are proposed as bus rapid transit lines. So a little bit about the funding, the sources and uses. With a 0.25% income tax, we would be operating a system that is about $108 million a year. 59% of that would be spent on regular local service. A quarter of that would be spent on the rapid service, 10% of that on the dial-a-ride service, and 6% on some bond payments. Where the funding comes from, of that $108 million annual operating, 46% of that new operating budget comes from the new referendum funds. The rest is basically the existing Indigo equation. There are passenger fares. The pie is a little bigger, so that 18% makes up more actual dollars. We have an existing local property tax that would be required to maintain the service and grow the 70% that we've proposed, and there's a little bit of state funding from the Public Mass Transit Fund. So on the capital expenditure side, this is infrastructure, buses, facilities. Over the 5-year implementation plan, there would be $390 million spent on bus rapid transit lines, facilities, new vehicles, and 60% of that budget is funded federally. 26% comes from local funds and 15% is bonded. So here are some pretty impressive stats. We talked about frequency, and what that really means is that more people have useful service in their neighborhoods, connecting them to jobs, healthcare, education opportunities. So today, only 96,000 individuals in Indianapolis have access to a frequent route. If the referendum passes, 324,000 people will be in walking distance of a frequent route. Jobs, 140,000 routes are currently located on a frequent route. Nearly 250,000 jobs were located on a frequent route if the referendum passes and we can build the Marion County Transit Plan as proposed. There is a huge population of households in poverty and minority households that would also be served with greatly enhanced frequent service throughout the network. Households in poverty, only 16% of the households in Marion County currently are served by a frequent route. That bumps up to 51% if the Marion County Transit Plan is enacted as proposed. Low-income households minority households, 14% are currently within walking distance of a frequent route. 45% of minority households would be within walking distance of a frequent route. So again, just wanted to reiterate that there are upcoming red line meetings. We are taking questions now, right? Counselor?
One more
Oh, one more presentation. I apologize.
That's okay. One more.
Oh, there's lots more information available online. IndyConnect.org has information about the overall regional plan. Indigo has several web pages about the various projects that are going on. The transit plan is the Marion County Transit Plan, and the Red Line has several web pages at indigo.net/redline.
Does that clicker work? Okay. Thank you for coming out today. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm Vice President of Government Relations at the Indy Chamber. Talk a little bit about the economic situation in Marion County, Indianapolis, Marion County. No secret, we've got a lot of momentum. We've had recent jobs announcements on our tech industry. We've got great rankings, top 10 best city for young professionals and to start a business, high tech job growth and best downtowns, solid investment in the downtown area. But we also, next slide, but we also have some significant challenges that have happened very quickly in our city. Since 2005, the Indy metro area has lost 16,000 manufacturing jobs. That's 20% of our manufacturing jobs lost in 1 decade. 90% of those jobs have been lost in Marion County alone. Only, to put that in perspective, only Detroit and Cleveland have seen a larger exodus of traditional manufacturing jobs from the urban core than Indianapolis. So today, so if you look at this chart, it's kind of small to see, but 1 dot equals 25 households. Red dots, the redder, orange, and yellow dots are lower income households, $15,000 or less. It goes up to $100,000 in the blue. As you can see, we have lost a lot of wealth in our community. Today we have high concentrations of poverty and high concentrations of intergenerational poverty. In fact, Indianapolis ranks 46 out of 50 in top metro areas for socioeconomic mobility. You only have a 4.8% chance of escaping poverty. If you're born in the bottom 20% of income, you only have a 4.8% chance of rising to that top of the 20% of income. We also spend an amazing amount of our incomes on transportation services. So as you look at 80% AMI would be moderate income folks spend 30.2% of their budget on transportation as a percentage of their income. We rank 29th out of 30 of our peer cities. So while we have low housing costs, we have very high transportation costs. So it's been noted, 14th largest city, 83rd largest bus fleet, 73rd in employment access by transit, 79th in aging in place, and worst among large cities for food deserts. So we very much see at the Chamber that reliable transit provides citizens and visitors access to jobs, education, healthcare, and other amenities. Talk today about the system. This is a chart that repeats what Brian has already said. This is a great example of what job access means and where we're falling very short. FedEx, for example, has 200 open positions that they cannot fill because they are unable to get people to the job site. FedEx is a company that hires and promotes from within. They provide tuition reimbursement, so it's a great entry-level job to get skills and to get an education, to move up through the ranks, get experience, and take those skills elsewhere. But they can't even fill those positions. So we are less competitive as a region. If people can't get access to a job or education or health care, they're going to be unhealthier. They're not going to be getting the skills they need to get a better job, and they're not going to be earning the incomes they need to support their families and produce tax revenue for our community. And FedEx is just a great example. It currently takes, if you live at 34th and Midhofer, it takes you 2 hours and 40 minutes to go to a FedEx facility. Those are just some of the economic situations that we're facing in Indianapolis and why the Chamber feels transit, while not a silver bullet, is very key to providing that access to education, jobs, and health care.
Thank you. If we could have the lights. Will somebody in the back hit the lights? Pretty please. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll open it up to questions. We have a small enough group that I think we can probably just call on you and we'll repeat the question if it's not loud enough. But if you would please state your name And Bart, if you want to, I don't know, we'll put 2 minutes on in case people get, yeah, and then we can, we can keep going. Well, let's see, it's,
I'd like to respectfully ask that we not do the 2-minute rule at this meeting. We've had that at all of the city council meetings, and I think the public should be able to have a larger voice in this because no one from a dissenting position was allowed to be on the forum.
Dr. O'Neill, I respect your question. I would ask you how we make sure everyone gets a fair chance to speak.
No, there's only a handful of people here. I think everyone will be able to speak.
Okay, well, we'll see. I reserve the right to move it along if we have repetitive questions and/or statements. And you may have missed the beginning, but my statement was we did not have opposing opinions on the panel simply because this is just about getting the facts of the plan straight. There will be many other times where you can express opinions, dissenting or supportive, but this is really about trying to figure out what we're actually voting on in November. There's been so much confusion over what the actual transit plan includes and what is actually on the referendum that we felt it, rather than stage it as a debate where it can be difficult to have productive information conveyed, we would have something on television that people could access on demand at a later time with just the facts, and then we can move on during other meetings to other stages of that. So who would like to ask a question? Well, Dr. O'Neill, we might as well start with you.
I have a few questions.
And please state your name for the
My
camera.
name is Stephen O'Neill, and I've been to a number of...
And please keep it to one, and then we'll come back to you. Can you keep it to one question, and then we'll circulate, and then we'll come back for all your questions?
Okay.
Thanks.
And so my first question will be, in the presentations that were made by Mr. Llewellyn and Mr. Northrup, it was implied that in this referendum, if it passed, that somehow the entire Marion County transit plan would be enacted, and that there would be 3 new bus rapid transit lines as a result of this. Now, I would like some clarification of that, because my understanding is this referendum passes. However, the blue and the purple line, which would be the next 2 lines hypothetically to come on board down the road, would require a significant amount of additional federal dollars to be approved by the federal government in order to put that in place. So the question is, the presentation, I think, is somewhat misleading, and the referendum language is absolutely misleading to the Marion County taxpayer. If someone walks in and votes on this referendum thinking that it's going to make 3 new bus lines, they are mistaken.
Okay, let's give them a chance to respond. Mr. Northrup and Mr. Llewellyn, if you'd like to clarify.
So, you're right, Dr. O'Neill, it does assume 50% federal matches for the capital costs of the blue and the purple line. The question of whether those lines could exist at all is a question of time. So the only way the plan is a 5-year build-out is if those federal grants are secured in that time frame and delivered and built in that time frame. If it takes longer, then the federal application, the funding would drive the schedule for delivering those lines. Now, whether those lines exist at all it has no bearing on what's on the referendum language. The lines could exist without federal funds in a longer time frame. They could bond backward based on the revenue stream that the referendum would create. It would just take longer than 5 years to build out that plan.
Okay. Next question. Yes, ma'am?
On suggestion for separating the issue.
Could you
of the
please
bu-
state your name for the camera?
I'm
Thank you.
Karen Neislinger.
Yes.
I have a suggestion. It seems to me like the wording of the referendum conflates the concepts of improved bus transportation and bus rapid transit. They're 2 different things. Indigo can improve bus service generally in the city and should do so regardless of whether there's a BRT. Why are the 2 things not separated for purposes of the referendum so that people could vote on improved bus transportation, generally speaking, and then whether or not they even want these BRT systems that are not funded? you haven't even applied for the blue or the purple lines. That's my first question. My second question is why College Avenue for the red line when the most heavily traveled routes are the East 38th Street and Washington Street East and West?
Okay, we'll take your first question first. We're going to keep it to one question per person, then we'll do it again. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk. I know it's only 6:45, but I also know these things can run really long. So let's address your first question, then second question, and then we'll move to one question per person.
So the short answer is that there are lots of different ways that you can quote-unquote improve bus service. The biggest gap that we have in Marion County with our bus service is frequency and hours of service. Those problems would be fixed with new resources that could come through a referendum. Or if there's other funding that the council identifies that we could potentially improve the bus service otherwise, improving the bus service is kind of a very broad opportunity. Travel time is the biggest way that rapid transit improves bus service. The hours of service across the board and the frequency of service would get upgraded for the regular local bus.
So Brian, could one of you clarify why there weren't two separate referenda, one for BRT and one for just improving the bus system overall? I think that's what Mrs. Neisinger is asking.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a reason you combined it?
Because it all works together. It is very unlikely that somebody just gets on one bus and rides a few stops and gets off along that same line. It's a network that works together. So the network was designed to direct resources to where the highest ridership and highest density areas are on those rapid transit lines. But then in order to feed into those rapid transit lines, the rest of the local bus network needs augmented.
And would you repeat your second question, please, Mrs. Neisinger?
My second question is, you had said earlier, one of you did, that the East 38th Street and Washington Street East and West are the most heavily traveled routes in the city. Am I correct with that?
Correct.
And why not put whatever first BRT line you're going to have there? Because that seems to me like where the need is greatest.
So part of it is, so the Meridian Street corridor is the red line from downtown to 38th Street. Is 1% of Indigo's service area and 15% of our ridership. So that's one part of the answer. I'll let Sean talk about the alternatives analysis and the alignment.
Right. The first phase of the red line has significantly more density than either the blue line or the purple line. It has more households in poverty, more low-income households, more job density, significantly more job density. 1 in 4 jobs in the county is located along the first phase of the red line.
From what numerical street to what numerical street down College? Because that's not exactly true.
The red line, so from 66th and College to University of Indianapolis. So the line exists as part of a larger system. If the referendum were to not go through and the red line were, then Indigo would have the beginnings of a frequent network grid. Right now, the 39 and the 8 run east-west at 15-minute frequencies. That's an investment that City County Council made back in 2013, I believe, to improve frequency. That was the first investment in transit out of the IndyConnect planning process, was in frequency on the Route 8 and the Route 39 east-west routes. The Meridian Street corridor, as Brian said, already functions as an extremely heavy transit corridor. There's currently 3 bus routes that interline on that section right now. Along the red line route, approximately 23% of households are below the poverty line. 40% of family households include a single parent. There's a significant amount of need in the red line corridor and significantly more people than there are in the other corridors. It was eligible for maximum federal grant at the maximum amount, which takes the burden off of Marion County taxpayers and allows the federal government to pick up the tab for the heaviest used route in the Indigo network today. That's why that route was able to move forward as it has.
Okay, next question. Mr. Green?
Yes. So,
Please state your name. Sorry, I'm going to
sorry.
keep
Paul Green.
reminding you.
My
Thank you.
name is Paul Green.
Thank you.
Everybody who's stood up and has spoken about very important things, about connecting people in poverty and people without opportunity to opportunity. And I really enjoyed the conversation about food deserts. And these are noble things. And these are things that we should do as an organization, as a community. These are things that we should support. Now, where I get confused is why are you not connecting people to that? As I drove here, I drove past 4 grocery stores. I think under the current red line, where the red line runs, we'll be connecting people from 25th Street to the Whole Foods up at 52nd Street. That's the only grocery store. So with that noble intent and with that noble goal that we're all behind, it seems quite disingenuous that you've mapped out the red line where it is, because there's all this fervor about, look, this is going to help people out, and the reality is, where you've drawn it, it doesn't.
I would dispute that it actually does. The fresh time is going in on College, the marsh is
certainly,
downtown, the
things can be
Safeway is on the
built.
south
Things
side.
can be built. Property can exchange hands, and things can be built. But as it stands right now, you can dispute all you like, but you're incorrect.
No, it already is built on that corridor. That corridor is extremely dense today. Blocks are very short. Residential densities are high along the entire corridor. And connecting people from elsewhere in the system to that north-south spine, the red line as designed today would connect to all except for one Indigo route today. So that allows for faster north-south transfers for everyone that uses the system. It's useful citywide. Connecting to 1 in 4 jobs in the city is, that's one of the ways that you measure the potential success of a rapid transit line, is the employment density that you connect to. And the employment density on this corridor is extremely high. The student density on this corridor is also extremely high, with IUPUI and UIndy and Ivy Tech right on the corridor. So there's a lot of density and activity on this corridor as designed. That's why.
Not above 38th Street.
38th Street, so above 38th Street provides a couple of different things. One is it's a corridor that has pretty significant residential density today. It has a destination in Broad Ripple, and it connects to routes on the north end of the line. It also creates a north-south opportunity so that if referendum does not happen, there's a north-south spine and the east-west spines that connect into it. So it's part of a larger network conversation.
So without any specific development, what we've done is we've connected IUPUI to Broadway. That's not my idea of providing opportunity.
No, you're connecting them to Ivy Tech, University of Indianapolis, IUPUI, IU Health System, employment centers. Our largest employers, Eli Lilly, Rolls-Royce, I mentioned IU Health again, IUPUI, the state government. Those are all high job density areas, high educational opportunity areas. So it's not just connecting rich people to rich college students to the bar district. This is high residential and job density.
But what he's saying is you go out 38th Street and then go up Keystone, which has a ton more jobs than going up College.
Excuse me, if you'd like to ask a question, please
That
keep the
wasn't a
format.
question, that was a statement of fact.
But please don't speak out of turn. We'll lose the handle here. Sir, in the blue, you've had your hand raised, and then behind him after that.
Okay. My name is Don Foley, and I applaud efforts to connect people to jobs and education, to housing and different opportunities. My chief concern has to do with the bus rapid transit, not necessarily specific to the red line, but in general. In your materials here, you show that total capital expenses is 83% dedicated to bus rapid transit. I'm really concerned of the premium that we're paying for the infrastructure on this project. If our objective is to connect people, that money could be used for buses, it could be used for special paralytic services, it could be used for a whole lot of things to connect a whole lot more people at far less cost. So I guess I would have a general question of why our capital expenses are deemed to be that high and that necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. Who would like to respond?
So the reality about the way that transportation funding works in the states is that the federal government grants out money for capital projects, and then maintenance and operations is on the local folks. So if we were to use that 83% on a load of buses, there's not the local resources to operate those buses. That's one part of the equation. Another part of the equation is that spending money on infrastructure helps lower the operational costs. So by speeding up the travel time, you attract more riders, you earn a higher fare box recovery, and you lower the cost per mile because it doesn't take as long to go a mile. Those are the reasons why the infrastructure is so important with this plan.
Yeah, it's just a quick follow-up. which
Sure.
is How much time are we saving? I mean, when we say that we're going to do this fast, I know we're doing dedicated bus lanes and so forth, but we're only really talking about a matter of minutes, aren't we? I mean,
No,
what are we talking about? Help me
So-
understand.
The state of affairs today, if you catch a bus at 38th and Meridian and you go all the way downtown to the Capitol, it takes 30 minutes. With the bus rapid transit facilities as we have planned, that's down to 15. So, you know, my colleagues were talking about opportunity and that time, the upward mobility conversation, that time that's spent on a bus is time that you can't get back and invest in yourself. So those are part of the equation about why reducing travel time is so important. It's important for the operation of running a bus system, and it's important for the lives of people who use it.
Thank you. Behind him, in the white?
Hi, my name is Robert Evans, and I'm looking at this, and it says that the referendum will bring in 53 million per year. And I was looking at the last map you showed, it showed the population density for lower income areas to where the jobs are, and looked at the FedEx model. So I'm wondering, why aren't you looking to some of these employers that supposedly are begging you to get people to them to give you this money and help out? Because if you think about all these employers that supposedly exist that are asking for this, splitting that up between 5% employers per year, 53 million is not a lot. If you had that type of support, you could set up a type of like park and ride situations, because as your map showed, the density, the population and need for job density is in the same areas, going to very point-to-point routes. So I think the concern a lot of us have is that you're really not, it's not really an innovative plan. You're just like taking tax dollars for something that the goal may or may not be hit. And just part of that is like, when you're saying that it doesn't get rich people with water, for all the places that you mentioned, downtown, you can get all those places on the college bus right now, the walk-ups and Meridian bus, because everyone you said, except for Eli Lilly, is right downtown. So I don't understand how this is like a revolutionary change. For 15 minutes also, you're going to lose some of that 15 minutes just walking the distance, the further distance to the new, to the stops versus having 50 stops. So you're not really, 15 minutes isn't really anything.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Who would like to respond?
I'll just say the vast majority of businesses file their taxes in their personal income taxes. They're not C-corps. I didn't realize that getting people access to education and jobs is not a cause that we should try to take on and getting greater access. So say first, the vast majority are going to be paying, businesses are going to be paying in their personal income taxes.
Well,
I'll also say that there are
great partnership investment.
Great opportunities for public-private partnerships. If you look at the health line in Cleveland, the naming rights that came with that. If you look at partnerships with universities and their students, look at IU Bloomington. They have an agreement with the IU transit system and the Bloomington transit system. There are opportunities, and actually the legislation encourages public-private partnerships.
Have you pursued that for this plan? Did you start there is the question we have.
So the legislation was a product of the state
We're
legislature.
not talking about the referendum, we're talking about the need for better public transit in this line. Have you pursued the funding for that in the private sector first is the question.
So the funding source is stipulated in the legislation that's part of the referendum. There is not a mechanism for local communities to collect the business tax in order to improve the transit system.
Okay, moving on.
We're not talking about tax. We're not talking about tax.
We need to keep these questions to the referendum for now. This is a referendum voter education. This is not about the process that started 10 years ago. Mr. Jarwin, you had a question in the back?
Yeah, my name is Dan Sharman. I own Pat Hinsdale at 54th College. I live and work in the area. Brian, Mr. Llewellyn, I know you were at the one meeting that I attended to, which was at Mo and Johnny's, call it September? I mean, when was that? Quite a long time ago. One of the initial ones. At that point, first of all, moving back up a little bit, I too, like some of the other people here that have spoken, am for improving the public transit. If, dependent upon where that is and what that means as an improvement, in where I am located and where my business is, colleges, which we invited several of you guys that were at that meeting to come to my restaurant. I invited you personally to come and sit on a Saturday night and set at a desk and a table and ask people. I have 300 people that walk through my restaurant every day, 400 or 500 on a Saturday. I invited you guys to come down and sit and ask people what their thoughts were about the red line, what they knew about it. Nobody in that area knew anything about it at all at that time. And so we started bringing it up until I learned about it. Then I went over and told 20 Tap and Joe at Yaps and some other business owners who had no clue. So with how you guys were reaching out, and we've worked with business owners and business people in the community, you haven't. Not with me and not with anybody on that corner. And that is a corner where you've designated to have one of the stations. None of you have taken me up on my offer yet, by the way. I have not heard about the phone call, nor have I got an email from anybody. So offer still stands. The concerns that I brought up at that point was why College Avenue? It's already an extremely dense avenue, certainly from 66 down to 38th Street and even beyond. Most of the traffic, the bus riders that use that College 17 are 38th Street and south. I know there is a number that comes a little bit north, but it's very, very small, minute compared to what's south lower. These are already well-developed, built neighborhoods with high median incomes. The traffic down College, I don't know if any of you live there. I believe we asked a few of you that. The one gentleman that I said he lives in that area is not here today. But I drive it and walk it and see it every single day of my life. And at 4 o'clock, it's busy all the time, but starting at 4 o'clock, no matter which way you're coming, north or south, it is a cluster of a mess all the time. And it backs up from street light to street light to stop, it goes for blocks and blocks and blocks. Add in the fact that you were going to eliminate one of those lanes for the bus and put that median there and then eliminate left turns, it's going to cause even more of a traffic nightmare and a problem. Not only for first responders, heaven forbid there is a terrible accident, that first responders are going to have a much more difficult time now trying to get to an accident, say that's in the middle of, say Kessler to 57th Street. How are they going to get to that accident with a bus median, an 8-inch median in the middle of the road, on one lane this way and one lane that way? That's going to take a lot of time away. And what about, I have 8 semi-trucks that come to my restaurant on a weekly basis. Now they're going to have to make 3 right turns into the neighborhoods, into Meridian Kessler neighborhoods around, just to get to my restaurant. And there's 6 restaurants on my corner.
Okay, can we let them respond?
6.
That was a lot of questions.
As soon as I'm finished. I'm not asking a lot of questions, I'm making statements supporting my comment. It's going to be a very big problem. Why not move it over to Keystone, which I understand was on the original plan, which is a lot more blighted throughout the entire corridor up and down Keystone, which needs that kind of development, which needs economic money put into it, which needs more jobs created, and all the things that you guys want to do and bring people to and attract people to on a much bigger surface foundation that has 6 lanes versus the 2 or 3 lanes that College already has right now, which you're going to eliminate parking, you're going to cause traffic nightmares, it's going to cause huge first responder nightmares. I have 5 accidents that happen a week right in front of my shop, right on that corner. So that's my big concern. Huge, huge, huge concern of mine and all the other people that I've talked to. And I have 300 that come to my restaurant.
We're going to let the panelists respond, but I would also like to reiterate, if you have very detailed questions about the red line, there are 4 additional meetings scheduled this month that will go into detail about the red line, where you can ask these very finely detailed questions and get more finely detailed answers. This session was intended to focus on the Indy Transit Plan as a whole and what we're voting on in November. So with that, please respond to Mr. Jarman's question.
I heard one question. I appreciate your passion and I appreciate your engagement with the process. You're talking to your neighbors. and getting other people engaged. That's exactly why this project is happening in the public sphere. That's part of what we're doing, is ongoing engagement and education. The one question that I heard that I can answer is, what about first responders? We've talked to IMPD and Public Safety and IFT, and they don't have any problems with the plan. We've coordinated with them. The dedicated transit lane will be available for first responders to use, and the signals will be interconnected with the Opticom signals that they use to take over the lights. So that will control the bus flow to actually, hopefully even potentially enhance their response time because of a dedicated facility.
Okay, can you speak a little bit to Mr. Jarman's question about the concern for traffic flow on College and how that will change with the BRT red line? So could you talk a little bit about, that's a big concern of everyone's. I also live very near College and travel it every day, so please speak to that so people have more clarification.
So on a high level, the traffic analysis was done. The project was designed to not make the traffic worse. I'm not a traffic engineer. I think Melody and Sean could probably talk a little bit more about that.
I'm happy to serve. Yeah. And that's, I'll just touch on it very briefly, and then this is really a conversation for the red line meeting more. The southbound College today has one lane, and it stops for two reasons. It stops for left turns, and it stops for buses stopping. People use right turn lanes to pass them. That gets cleaned up pretty significantly when the red line goes through, because the one source of delay, the buses stopping, moves into a dedicated facility, and then there are dedicated left turn lanes at intersections, between intersections and station areas. So that gets left turns and buses the two biggest sources of delay on southbound College. There's actually an increase in capacity on southbound College Avenue as part of the red line plan. Northbound does lose capacity. It goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane. But again, the two biggest sources of congestion are left turns, which stop the left lane when you're driving northbound on College, which I live in this area and I drive College Avenue every day too. If you're on the left, in the left lane on College, you stop when people turn left. It usually stacks up when people turn left. Also, one of the biggest accident sources on College Avenue is people turning left across traffic as an uncivilized intersection. So that's, those are two big sources of delays that are removed. Then the right lane, northbound, again, stops for buses. So when you move buses to the dedicated center lane, you're removing the two big sources of delay, north and southbound. The traffic analysis shows that traffic doesn't get worse on it, that when the signals are coordinated, right now the signals along College Avenue are not timed at all, they're not linked or coordinated, there's no ability, as I understand it, Melanie, to coordinate those signals. That changes, those signals will be linked as part of this plan. So that's really a conversation for the red line public meetings. We can talk a little bit about Keystone. Keystone Avenue in this plan is recommended as a frequent route because of the employment density along Keystone Avenue. There is not a significantly high employment density. Most of the employment in this area is very in auto-oriented formats. So there's large parking lots, think this area, think Meyer, 6 lanes of very fast-moving traffic that are often, leaving the county. Part of the reason that College works on a traffic standpoint is because the diversion to Keystone. Keystone has capacity to handle those. Keystone is a very high capacity road. It's difficult to cross from a pedestrian standpoint, and you have to go a pretty significant distance from any potential stop on Keystone to get to destinations. The built form of Keystone Avenue is not conducive to transit ridership at all. The destinations along Keystone are important as part of a network, and that's why in the transit plan it gets 15-minute service. It's part of a north-south network.
Okay, I saw a question in the back. Ma'am, please state your name.
Grace. Well, I've got a couple comments and a couple questions. First of all, on Keystone, you always talk about how far away Target and Meyer are from the bus stops. But if you look at Capitol Avenue all the way over to IUPUI and all those health services, that's a much longer distance for people to walk when they get off the bus. There isn't some way, as far as I know, to get from Capitol. If all these sick people who are supposed to be taking the bus to all the hospitals, they've got to walk a mile or something to get to IUPUI. That's just really boring. Okay, and so...
Well, they're not, so the hospital, actually, the stop is at the front door of the hospital. So the stop actually is right at 18th and Capitol. It's at the front door.
I'm saying IU. not Methodist.
I know, IU Methodist Hospital, if the stop goes to the front door, there's somebody
Okay, but what-
going to the doctor would not be going to IU.
But there are also hospitals over at IUPUI.
And that would be a transfer.
That's a transfer, it's a Route 3.
There
It'd
is a
just be another
transfer
bus.
there
Yep.
from
Yes.
Capitol over?
Yep.
Okay, okay. And years ago, I've said this before, there were express buses where they didn't stop every stop. And I used to take it to work if I wanted to, and it was faster, but there, you don't need the infrastructure just to have an express bus. I also believe I've read that there are about, 11,000 riders a day, is that correct? Currently in the system?
No, that's the red line projections for daily ridership.
Right, but what's the current ridership of the whole bus system right now?
35,000 trips a day.
35, okay, because, all right, that's, so you expect to go from whatever the sort of red line is now, like the college route?
College and 19 and 38 and
Yeah,
12,
what's that
14 on
currently,
Sunset.
just out of curiosity?
It's, you know what it is up
I think that the current, if you piece together the segments to make
Uh-huh.
up the alignment that the red line has proposed, total ons is about 7,000.
So you think there's going to be a decent bump up, okay?
Yeah.
And so, all right, and I live a block off, a block and a half off College. So I do know that when I turn left at 56th Street, somebody can go around me on the right. They aren't backed up. They can go around me. So when I turn right, I pull into the right lane to turn right so I'm out of the way. So it's not going to do that much for traffic. People have options of getting around a turning car now. I was a little curious also if anybody's done traffic counts for the east-west streets that will be most affected by this route. Because I'm not hearing at most meetings I've attended that anybody has factored in how those east-west streets are going to be so backed up. Kessler in particular, 54th Street, nightmare already. That's where all the accidents are. I don't like to go to those congested street corners, and now I will have to. I'll be forced to go there where there are pedestrians and deliveries, and I don't want to be around that. I don't want to be in the middle of where I'm likely to see or be in an accident. And how was this meeting advertised, just out of curiosity? I heard
It was on the Indy.gov website. It was on my personal website. I projected it out through my email list, which you're all invited to join. I send out weekly or monthly email newsletters. I push it out through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I think Mr. Oliver, I'm not sure how Mr. Oliver broadcasted it, but the council office broadcasted it through their website, as well
So
as,
somebody has to know to look for
Yeah.
a meeting. They can't just say,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm open to suggestion on that, by the way. I would love another way to reach
I would
every
too,
single
because I
person.
tried to Google it this morning after I heard about this meeting this morning, and it didn't come up. So you have to know where to look, and I don't, I know someone who just found out about the median, which is part of the whole mass transportation system, who lives on College. He found out about it yesterday, and he lives on College. To me, that's not good, that's not good for the city if it's that hard for people who actually live on College and will be the most affected to have only now heard that.
Okay,
about
thank
the
you, Ms.
meeting.
Welch. Let's let them respond to your comments and questions.
We are here tonight at the pleasure of the councilors. We have promoted these upcoming meetings. How many people have heard about the upcoming red line meetings before tonight? Okay, good. So
Actually, you sent out a mailer about tonight.
yeah, we did.
I actually did see that. There was a mail piece that I was told about. I didn't know it happened until yesterday.
So this is the challenge. People have to pay attention. People have to be engaged, and
It is a
we're
challenge. It's
not
hard.
perfect at reaching everybody. No matter what we do, we're not going to reach everybody. So we appreciate your help with reaching your neighbors and talking about it. And being engaged in the process.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for spreading the word. It's a constant challenge.
The traffic counts east and west?
Oh yeah, traffic counts on Kessler, and I assume like 54th Street, Kessler, where are the biggest, yeah.
So there was a detailed traffic analysis that was done. They built a model, it's called a VisSim model. So it actually simulates what traffic does, how it behaves on the street. It looks at the overall impact of the planned facilities in the area.
Was that east and west or just north and south?
I don't know the details. I know that this process exists, but if you come to the Red Line meeting on any of the 4 dates that are coming up, we're going to have our traffic engineers there, and they'll be able to answer more detailed questions about that.
You have a list of those dates?
Yeah, I think you came in late. Sorry, Dan, you didn't get the front. We published all that in the beginning. It's our ending slide, so we'll put that up again as soon as we cue the lights. You're welcome. Yeah, you missed the whole intro. Miss Duffy.
Hi, I came in late, so I apologize if this is a repeated question. Regarding the delay by Hamilton County about the transit going up that way to 2000, I believe, 18, and there's no guarantee that Hamilton County is even going to sign on to this. Has there been any discussion among the council people and the urban planners and the developers who are all for this about what this is going to mean for the neighborhood where this is going to disrupt and potentially become like the big version of transit for Indianapolis?
Thank you. Good question. Yeah. What's the scoop on the Marion County for the Hamilton County delay? How does that process have to
So
work?
Hamilton County and Johnson County both had conversations about this. Hamilton County had a group called the Hamilton County Transit Forum that worked on plans in that area. They recommended starting first with the western 2 townships in Hamilton County, which were Clay, which includes Carmel, and Washington, which includes Westfield. Washington Township held a vote and voted unanimously to put it on the ballot. Then Clay Township elected to wait and not hold a referendum in 16. They didn't commit to doing it in 2018. There's no commitment for any other county or any other township to come on at any point in the future. It's just an option that's available to 5 other counties outside of Marion County should they choose to act.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone not asked a question? If not, I'm going to...
This is part of it.
Does that have any impact on your projected ridership if Hamilton County drops out?
Not for phase 1 of the Red Line. It would impact phase 2 of the Red Line, which would be from Broad Ripple north to the county line and then on to Westfield, to Grand Park Westfield. But that part of the Red Line hasn't been engineered yet, hasn't really been discussed yet. There hasn't been an application for that.
Is that what this year budget projections over fair coverage and all that, the Hamilton County
Yes,
portion?
so the county plans stand on their own. So the Marion County plan is designed to stand on its own without Hamilton.
So you're saying, let me clarify this so I understand. So you're saying that if the referendum should pass, even if Hamilton County does not ratify or pass their own respective referendum, the Red Line Phase 2, we'll call it, would stop at the Hamilton County, Marion County line?
In the meantime,
Or would you terminate it at 67th? You wouldn't even take it to
that would be
96?
part of the longer term discussion. So that's
Okay, so
the
undetermined.
federal, it would, again, it goes back to the question that Dr. Neal asked very early on, which was the question about federal funding. And that phase 2 application, federal application would be much stronger if it included Carmel and Westfield than if it didn't include, than if it just included the north end of the Red Line in Marion County. So that's a difficult conversation, whereas it's a very different conversation about purple and blue. Those are very successful local routes and would have a much stronger chance at actually achieving federal funding than, like, say, phase 2 of the Red Line just within Marion County.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
This is part of that. Is Westfield allowed to vote on it since Carmel isn't? I
No.
thought,
No.
yeah, I thought they
It's
weren't by
countywide.
law allowed to because they weren't next to one.
That's correct. That's a good
And so
question. You're correct.
They're putting it on the burner. They have to wait for Carmel before they can
That's right.
vote on it.
Okay, we have a question here. The gentleman in red, please state your name.
Yeah, my name is Craig Friedrich. I live in the area right off the college there. And one of my questions is, not to debate about the Red Line or not, but regarding kind of the areas around where it possibly could develop or where it will develop, there's a lot of areas that lack streetlights, sidewalks, just basic public infrastructure. I live on Kessler there, and there's not a sidewalk. There's a guy who lives across the street. He has to walk through my front yard to the bus stop now that it's moved. Who actually works at FedEx. But anyway,
There you go.
like small world. But anyway, I was wondering if you guys could, if you guys could talk about kind of, obviously the referendum doesn't include spending for public infrastructure, But how would that be connected, and how would you make sure that things like that were built?
Thank you, Mr. Friedrich. Melody?
Melody Park from DPW Engineering. We have gone after federal funding for connectivity to the transit line, so missing sidewalk, deteriorating sidewalk improvement, all those are, we have asked for $4.5 million and it is planned to be received around 2020. So we are planning for that connectivity issue.
Thank you. Okay, oh, yes, ma'am in the white?
I'm Dion Rayner, and I will be going to some other meetings, but one of my concerns is that the rapid transit system may go the way of Blue Indy, is it Blue Indy?
Blue Indy. Yeah.
Blue Indy, which appeared, and we were not, no resident that I know of Indianapolis was in any way involved in the decision-making. And I don't know how successful Blue Indy is. I do know that the placement of the cars has disrupted, has caused a great deal of tension and problems with residents, with businesses. And it looks like this is going to be railroaded into our residential areas, into our neighborhoods, as I think Blue Indy is.
Who cares to respond to that?
I can respond. So we're here, we're holding 4 public meetings coming up. We've had hundreds of public meetings since 2009. So it's a very, very different process. I'm not as familiar with the Blue Indy process or how that happened. I know it's a pretty significant conversation when we start talking about these things, but this has been a very, very different, very, very open process. As far as whether it gets railroaded, it's contingent on a public vote. So I mean, you get to say in November on the ballot, and we're here just to make sure you know what the Marion County Transit Plan is, what the referendum funds would be used for. And so that's the purpose for meetings like this.
And we have requirements when we accept federal money for projects. We have continuous ongoing public input about all of the plans. So the reason that College Avenue was chosen, that was part of a public process. The blue line had its own public process. The purple line had some public process, and there's going to be more. So Blue Indy is a private operation, and we can't speak to that. That's a very separate issue, but we're here and we're going to continue to talk to the community. There are impacts, and we'll talk about those impacts, but the goal is that we create a system that has more benefits than impacts.
Okay, so I have 2 new hands in the front and then in the back, and then we'll do repeat questions. Yes, ma'am. Please state your name.
Joanne Sanders. I want to go back to the funding element of the referendum, and that is, okay, so it's going to be from 0.1 to 0.25. And I'm trusting that projections have been done over the course of several years. So that would include, I would imagine, increases in population in the downtown area that may not currently be included in numbers. Could you run through what you have projected for years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of this program?
So the financial model is built on current numbers. So it's the most recent numbers we have for income tax base for Marion County. And then we don't project growth of, we didn't go by neighborhood and say, downtown is growing fast, so we'll apply a growth rate to it. We assumed flat growth of Marion County over the, I believe it was either 10 or the 20-year average that it's had, which is like 0.2% growth. So it's very, very flat population. And then income growth by, not per capita income growth, 0 per capita income growth, but income growth by inflation only. And so the only way the revenue grows is by inflation and new population. Both of those are very, very low numbers. So it's built to be a conservative financial.
So because of the fact that there's a range that the council can choose, if you choose 0.1, what do you generate? And if you choose 0.25, what do you generate?
0.25 generates about $56 million in 2018 dollars. That is required to build out the plan as proposed.
That's
annually.
Required.
This tax, just to be clear, this tax is in perpetuity. This isn't like a 5-year, this is a forever tax we're voting on.
Yeah. So
forever, it's not going backwards ever.
Dedicated tax.
dedicated, well, it's forever. I mean, it's dedicated, but this is not it's not a mortgage. We don't pay it off eventually, it's forever. We will always pay this tax if this referendum passes. I want everyone to know that, that's really important.
The 2021 map requires passage of 0.25% income tax. We could build it out in 5 years and operate it in perpetuity. That's what the plan is built on. If the council chooses to enact a rate lower than 0.25, then voters don't get what we're communicating here.
And then would you be phasing things in?
We'd have to go through a whole other
Another
planning
plan.
process. Yep.
Right, so in theory, you would kind of keep the same general planning idea and then phase it in later on, but as written, the current legislation doesn't allow you to go back and revise that tax rate up. So you couldn't, city county council couldn't enact a 0.15 this year and see if it works, and then come back, am I right, Mark?
That's correct.
And then come back and do the other 0.1 to make it 0.25. It's one dip.
One shot.
Right.
Okay, and then it is dedicated, I understand that part. But because we are at the mercy of the state legislature, could they at any point in time determine that that funding needs to be redirected to another source?
Great
No, that's what
question.
the legislation, enabling legislation is all about, creating that dedicated revenue stream. Because right now, Indigo's budget is, well, the legislature can do whatever it wants.
I know.
It's a short
That's
answer.
my point.
But the legislation and allows for bonding, so it's very highly unlikely that the legislature comes back and strips us of that. Because it is not a new revenue stream. The council could enact this tax at any point by a majority vote of the council. It just wouldn't be dedicated. This is about creating the dedicated stream to fund a system. So they didn't give us new tax capacity. It's existing tax capacity that would be dedicated to transit.
But let me clarify something. I don't remember the name of the Senate, or the number of the Senate bill.
176.
Okay, 176, thank you. Doesn't that, could you clarify what that says? Doesn't it take a new dedicated tax to enact a large transit plan?
This creates the dedicated tax. That means right now, Indigo's budget could be increased or decreased by the city county council every year, as long as their bonds are paid off, their obligations are.
Right, but doesn't it take a referendum to approve
It takes a referendum
a
to
dedicated tax to
dedicate,
get a big expansion?
to dedicate the funds. That's what the referendum is really about. It's about dedicating the funds to transit. This is an existing, the CEDAT is an existing revenue stream that is available to our city county council for defined purposes. This creates a dedicated stream that could not be diverted year over year to fund shortfalls in another municipal function.
Okay, CFO Brown has something to add to that before you continue on.
Yeah, so right now, the Marion County income tax, the local tax is 1.75%. We're allowed to go up to 2.5% if we, at any time. If we choose this particular tax, we would carve off 0.25 of that 2.5% we could raise just for Indigo. So, pardon?
And 11 people vote it out.
Yeah, so, but anyway, so we got 2.5% we can go to, and 0.25 of that could be for Indigo.
No, nobody votes for them, just FYI.
Yeah.
And then I heard earlier, somebody mentioned that the state does provide some funding. Now, my question is, because of the state's not necessarily funding Marion County at the level to which we pay in, do we get the funding for Indigo or for this transit system commensurate with what we pay into the state?
The PMTF, the Public Mass Transportation Fund, used to be a dedicated, so it used to be 0.076, something like that, of the sales tax, a percent of the sales tax, which allowed it to grow every year. Several years ago, the legislature created that. They took that away as a set tax rate and made it a line item. So they essentially flatlined it. And what's happened across the state is more rural services come online and more metro services come online. So the pie has stayed the same as more communities have competed for those funds, and they're allocated based on a formula, based on service hours, lane miles, ridership. I mean, it's a pretty complicated formula. So we are always in favor of looking at ways to continue to grow that pie with inflation as more and more communities are looking to invest in transit. But that is the state's mechanism for funding transit, is the public mass transportation fund.
And it's likely that we're not getting the amount that's commensurate with our population and our usage and so forth.
Several of our counties in central Indiana are what's called donor
Donor
counties. There are 21, maybe 20 now, counties in the state that put more into the state's coffers than they receive back. I think 5 or 6 of them are in central Indiana.
Okay, Dr. O'Neill, and we'll come back to you. Oh, sorry, Lee, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor.
You're welcome.
My name is Lee Lang, and I've spent a little bit of time going through the grant application, the Small Stars grant application, and I have a number of questions, but one at a time. In the passenger fares projections out of the Indy Connect financial model, it's projected to be over a 51% increase in fare revenue in the first year of the red line, partial year of the red line. And I'm wondering what the strategy is to increase those fares by 51%, that fare revenue by 51%. I'm concerned that it's going to fall on the backs of people who are least able to handle these kinds of fare increases.
The increase in revenue comes from more riders. It doesn't come from an increase on the existing riders. So this gets back to the projection that we're currently serving about 6,600, 7,000 riders a day in the corridor, and the model shows that we're going to serve 11,000 riders a day. That's my understanding. If you come with that question to any of the red line meetings coming up, the project manager will probably have a better idea. But this is not, there isn't an assumption that we're going to raise fares. This is revenue growth by more ridership.
I have a follow-up to that, because I actually asked them this exact question over email, and the answer I got was completely different. First, I got it from Sean, and the numbers I got were that it's probable that they could raise fares up to, I think it was $2.25 per route, which would still keep us comparable to, I think it's Cleveland and other surrounding cities. So I think it's a little disingenuous to say that fare increases, or there's a conflict here someplace. I don't want to say it's
Well, yeah,
disingenuous.
let's let them address it.
Both of those things are partially true. So what Brian said about the fare increase based on ridership is entirely true. The way I answered the question of is there a planned fare increase, the answer is no, but it's been a long time since Indigo has had a fare increase. And so, yeah, we said that in the future, at some point, there probably will be a fare increase.
But the answer to that question, Brian just said that the projected increase is based on, the question was about ridership, about fare increases, that it's not based on that, it's not put on the
And both things can be true at the same time. So
both things can be true, but I'm talking about probability here,
right. So the red line financial model is not based on a fare increase.
Okay, so
that's based on ridership.
let me ask you specifically, so we're all on the same page here. What is the probability based on the numbers that Lee gave you, based on DRT systems nationwide, based on comparable cities, what is the probability that in the first year, in the first 2 years, that there will be a fare increase, and what do you think that fare increase will be?
We're doing a fare study, and that will be better than a probability. There will be a recommendation that comes out of that fare study. So
So it is a possibility. Let's just build
It's definitely possible.
It's a possibility, but the financials, the plans don't reflect an assumption that we're going to raise the fare. The assumption is that the fare stays the same and that ridership grows, therefore ridership revenue grows.
Okay.
On that note, I'd like to know how ridership can increase if the number of stops is decreased.
It's about the frequency, hours of service, reliability. This is about improving the service.
And so you're assuming that people are going to walk further to catch a bus because it comes more often? That's your assumption, and that's what all this is based on?
It's based on statistical modeling that the Federal Transit Administration gives us. It's called the STOPS model. It generates ridership projections based on certain variables, and it's based on statistics from around the country.
Okay, so I live at 56 at College. Right now, I can walk right down to the corner, either corner. I live in the middle of the block. Catch a bus to go north or south. I would have to walk anywhere between 2 to 3 blocks to catch the bus. If I was a disabled person or somebody with 2 or 3 little kids, and it's snowing outside or it's raining outside, do you think that it's more likely I'm going to take the bus, given that I have to walk further? Or if I was somebody in a wheelchair, do you think I could get my wheelchair down the sidewalk through heavy snow or ice?
So
Do you really think
statistics-
that more people are going to ride the bus because it comes every 10 minutes as
So,
opposed to every 30?
yes, statistics show that if the bus is frequent, if it's reliable, if it's running longer hours, and if it's fast, if the speed is fast, it's comparable to a drive, which it is from that area.
Even
that
if there's
yes,
further
people,
stops and they're farther apart?
yes.
Because
Because
it's-
actually, the fact that it's farther apart is part of what speeds up the service.
I
Because
think-
stopping so frequently is what slows down local bus service.
Nobody in this room believes that. I'll be
It's-
honest with you. I don't believe it. I don't care what their studies say. You can have studies that say anything. Logic tells me otherwise.
Well, it's observation.
That's it. All you can expect our panels to do right now is present the data that they know best, and you are up to your own opinions and take what they have at its value for you. Mr. Foley, please.
Okay. My question has to do with a concern about the actual design of the routes. And I'm using as my case example the neighborhood I live in, because the 17 now serves both Chittard High School and Broderick High School. So my concern is with the red line, they will no longer be served. And so my question generally is, are these lines being designed so that IPS schools can be served through the system? Because in this case, they will be off the system.
So there isn't a route on Kessler anymore.
And that's what those red lights are.
You didn't know that? You didn't go, you didn't know that?
No, we just said.
I just said
No,
that
he said that
it
as a
was
fact.
eliminated, that the Kessler
Yeah,
service was eliminated.
That wasn't a question.
As for providing bus service to schools, public transportation corporations cannot operate yellow school bus service. We cannot.
No. What I'm referring to is students take the bus to go to the high school.
Sure.
And so that's their way of getting there. And so now, you'll be able to get up to about 66th and College, or excuse me, you have 62nd, I guess, or somewhere there, and then you have a fairly long walk. I mean,
There's still service planned on Broderville Avenue, and there are important places to serve, but the reality is that there are basically 2 times a day where it's important to serve those places. And this is a very high-level, long-term plan. If the referendum is passed and we have new resources, then we'll work with community destinations like we do today to meet their needs.
So my only question then is the current plan taking into consideration student service to the IPS high schools?
Those are always destinations that we keep
Are they
in
or
mind.
are they not? Are they or are they not being planned in? That's my question.
Sure, they're absolutely destinations that we keep in mind, and they were looked
Are
at.
they being planned in? You're evading my question. Are they currently being planned in?
Are they part of the current plan?
Yes, I mean, yes, as part of the Marion County Transit. I mean, you can chart the school locations on this map, and you'll see many of them are on the system.
All right, so this is an exception then to that principle.
Well, Chittard's not IPS for one.
No, Broderick is.
Broderville is, right, and Broderville goes from every 30-minute service, or now it's every 30-minute service on Broderville as opposed to every hour, because that bus has been consolidated onto Broderville Avenue, so it actually has better service than it did before.
Okay.
So off the red line comes over there to Broderick?
There's a local route that traverses Broderville Avenue. It intersects with the red line and then goes downtown and serves other areas. There's local service. Those are important destinations. Those are always kept in mind as we do our planning, and most schools are still on public transit lines.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take 3 more questions, but before, I'd just like to point out Counselors Vapo, Seeley, and there you are, Counselor Lee Robinson, who walked in the door. We're going to take 3 more questions. Dr. O'Neill, in the back, you haven't asked the question, and in the red, you have not asked the question. And I'm sorry, man in the white, you were in the line for a long time. You're behind the camera, I'm sorry, you keep getting hidden from my view. Why don't you go after Dr. O'Neill?
This is a question regarding representation on the Indigo board. I want to ask a question as to why the Chamber of Commerce has a representative on the Indigo board and it's rather confusing. The Chamber of Commerce is known to mainly promote larger businesses, and a lot of the businesses that we're talking about up and down these corridors are smaller businesses. To have someone from the Chamber of Commerce on the Indigo board making decisions with regards to choice of routes, where they run, etc., seems to me to be a significant conflict of interest. If we're talking now about how we're going to spend taxpayer dollars, Mr. Fisher had brought up about how Cleveland and Detroit, etc., were the only two places behind us. And I think that has occurred because of not necessarily poor mass transit, but because of misuse of funds. And what I'm concerned about as a taxpayer is why the Chamber of Commerce, representing big business, is on the Indigo board making these sort of decisions.
Thank you, Dr. O'Neill. Who wants to?
The Chamber of Commerce does not have an appointment to the Indigo board. I was appointed by Mayor Ballard as an individual, as a taxpayer, as a resident of Butler-Tarkington. I don't dictate where lines go. I'm a board member. I provide guidance, fiscal oversight. I don't do the engineering. I don't try to play traffic planner. So as a taxpayer like you, if you get appointed to a board, good for you.
With all due respect, sir, if someone is not going to appoint a general surgeon to be, such as I, on the Indigo board, it's a little bit different. It's very hard to separate your professional responsibilities and your personal responsibilities. So I do not think that you can say you're just a taxpayer living in Butler-Tarkington. You are, in all intents and purposes, representing the Indy Chamber of Commerce on the Indigo board. Now, in Senate Bill 176, it says that no taxpayer funds can be used to promote the referendum. Okay. What a lot of people see is the Chamber of Commerce with an individual sitting on the board is the end run around that Senate Bill 176. They won't be using taxpayer funds, but I guarantee you that the Chamber of Commerce will be spending a significant amount of money to promote this. And in this year of establishment versus the non-establishment people, this seems like the fix is in.
We would, the Chamber had advocated for the creation of the legislation. It has been a top priority for the Chamber for well over a decade. I served on the Central Indiana Regional Transportation Authority before I was on the Indigo board. We would be doing this regardless of whether I was on the Indigo board or not. It is a big deal for our members, and by the way, the vast majority of our members have fewer than 50 employees. They're small businesses. We do have large businesses, but we have small businesses. The one-person shop all the way up to Eli Lilly and Company, Anthem, Rolls-Royce, etc.
So who's going to subsidize the businesses such as Fat Dan's, etc., who are going to experience significant economic losses during the time of construction and potentially during the time when this is taking away parking spaces, etc., in front of their establishments? We've seen in other cities, such as San Jose, one comes to mind, where there's been significant economic loss to the small businesses. Who picks the winners and the losers?
Does anyone care to respond to that?
I don't know that there's a system set up right now.
Mike Terry at a previous council meeting said, we're working with the chamber on this. That was several months ago. What's the plan?
We don't have one.
Who's we? The Chamber of Commerce or Indigo?
The Chamber doesn't have a plan. If Indigo wanted to create a program, we do have an entrepreneurship services division that works and administers small operating cash flow loans. Might it make sense for that, which is a separate 501c3 with its own board, might it make sense for them to help with that? Maybe, but I'm not in those discussions. I've never been in those discussions. And right now, as far as I know, as a board member or a chamber staffer, there is no program.
Well, Joe Pintiat told me himself that he is thinking of closing down his shop and moving away because of this. Now, this was his anchor store of all of his Yachts restaurants. and this has potential for being lost at 54th and College. So someone needs to get on the stick here and start seeing what are we going to do about the small businesses, because if they really do represent the larger percentage of your membership, then someone needs to stick their neck out for them.
So the larger question of business impact during construction is a good question, and that's one that really should be addressed in the red line public meetings. The project team has been through this in other cities. They implemented a bus rapid transit line in Cleveland and in Grand Rapids, where they've had to deal with disruption during construction. I think that in the way that they're bidding the construction schedules to try and minimize disruption at each of the corridors, and so that's a very worthwhile question to raise at the upcoming red line meeting.
That's going to be a very important process. Ma'am in the white?
Thank you. I've been going...
Would you please state your name?
My name is Karen Brogan. I live north of Kessler on College. And I've been going to all of the meetings that I could, and I would go in, you know, the red line meetings, and I'd go in, I'd sign in, put my email, my address, my phone number, and I'd see these, you know, idea posters, and I could never, I'd say, you know, I would try to ask questions of people, oh, this is just preliminary, this is just preliminary. And then the next thing I know, they're planning on putting a great big concrete thing down the middle of College, which means I won't be able to turn in and out of my driveway. And so I really started getting concerned about that, and it just seems like, I mean, I was never notified of any traffic study. I mean, I drive that street every day. I try to drive in and out of my driveway every day. And I mean, I won't even go. I go like 6 blocks out of my way now to avoid Kessler and College because it's so backed up. It backs up. You know, I can look out my front window, and we've got 3 to 4 blocks backed up every afternoon of you know, just cars waiting to go south. And so you're going to take out a lane, put in a median, and you know, my son works down at 54th in College, so I'm swing by there all the time. And I mean, I heard from some other people that not only Joe of Yachts, but several other small businesses are, you know, because you can't get in and out of Yachts because of all the stupid blue cars that are, you know, I mean, I'd love to swing by Yachts and pick up something to take home for dinner, but you can't park, and then you go around, there's no place around there because of all the traffic. And I just think keeping people informed and allowing people input. I mean, I'm going to have to vote against the referendum, which is going to make it look like I'm against an improved bus system, which is not not true at all. But I'm very unhappy with the plan as it is, and I've had no ability to put any input except like right now. And so I mean, I would have been happy to go to meetings if I had known of any that I knew of. But whenever you go to meetings, nobody wants to hear from you. So I haven't considered that a meeting.
Would you guys care to respond?
That is not how we intended to conduct the meetings, and if that was your experience, that is not what you should have experienced. I'm happy to talk with you offline and talk about the specific impacts that you're worried about. I will connect you with the project team, and I will make sure that we are anticipating your issues and we do a little research and dig in before the next set of meetings. Have you seen those dates? The 20th, 21st, 23rd, 25th?
I have not. I got here just a little.
We're going to put that slide up in just a minute. We've got 2 more questions. Oh, you passed it out? Oh, great. Okay, so there's a flyer circulating. Okay, sir in the red, and then in the Hawaiian shirt in the back.
Ted Flange. This is hardly a novel observation. Obviously, we live in a time with very rapid change in transportation technology, transportation business models, networking, artificial intelligence, the whole 9 yards. Why do you think that most of this won't be obsolete in 10 years?
That's a really good question, a fair question, one that we've been having a lot. When it comes to on-demand transit, and I'll deal with that first, and then autonomous are kind of the 2 big trends. The third one is electrification, which the red line right now is proposed to be electric. The other lines need to go through study. But as far as like the Uber effect, as far as companies that are trying to run private transit service, like there's one called Bridge that's doing a private transit service in Kansas City. Uber Pool is starting to run a private transit service where you can request a bus on your phone. When you're running an on-demand service like that, just because of the amount of mileage you have to drive to pick somebody up, at best you're doing 8, 9 people per hour in terms of boardings and like people going on and off of that vehicle. As those systems become more and more successful, they move to fixed route. So Bridge has a contract with Kansas City to start running on-demand service in some of their lower ridership areas, and it's very, very successful there. And that's a solution that could be successful for parts of Marion County that don't have the fixed routes on them right now. But as it's done better in corridors of density, they start to run fixed route service because the worst Indigo routes do in the 20s, the best Indigo routes do in the 30s and 40s boardings per hour. So there's just a geometry that works better with fixed route. That's not an arcane idea, and it actually supports the trend of people living at higher densities, people living in more, with ridership rising, with the boom of downtown, with the boom of areas like that. It supports those trends much more so than on-demand transit does. As far as autonomous goes, that's a trend that's coming. There's all sorts of research on autonomous. The big players are on it right now, whether it's Google or GM or Delphi. One of the biggest expenses for operating transit service is the cost of paying a driver. And so that's going to be a big union conversation at some point in the next few decades. But one way that transit companies are going to be able to get a lot more out of the public dollar is by going to autonomous transit vehicles. It's also going to be an easier technology than a personal vehicle. So these are conversations that are certainly happening when we're talking about transportation planning. They're kind of all in their infancy. But they're things that are not mutually exclusive to the idea of fixed route. A lot of the conversation today has been focused on rapid transit lines, which is actually the cheapest form of transportation per rider that a transit company can provide. It's actually the most efficient thing they can do per rider is run higher capacity routes on higher density corridors faster. So that's, as a transit service tries to have a set of tools in their toolbox to provide the best service to constituency, that's a very important one where they can keep cost per rider down.
Okay, Hawaiian shirt in the back, and then actually Councilor Oliver has a question to finish us off. So, sir in the back, would you state your name, please?
Sure, David Christopher Arborough, and I actually live up at College as well, however, back in one of the side streets, still in the Raymond Kessler neighborhood. And College right now is already congested, and there are cars parked on both sides, and putting this system in, I don't see how that's going to be beneficial to the actual people that live on College. In addition, just has anybody ever noticed how many people are riding the current Indigo buses going up and down College? Hardly any. What makes you think that this is going to improve revenue stream for Indigo?
Because they're going to make it impossible to drive around there.
It's going to make it very, it's a bunch of the car extremely difficult.
Okay, we'll let the panel respond. That's a little bit redundant. Some of the pieces have been covered, but please reiterate some of that and then talk about it. Yeah, no problem, sir. We know. No big deal.
So the transit service becomes increasingly more useful, attracts more riders when it is frequent and reliable and operates many hours a day. Those are all things that the current bus system lacks. It lacks reliability because of lack of dedicated infrastructure. It lacks frequency, so the bus doesn't come often enough for it to be convenient. And it lacks hours of service, so you can't get where you need to go early in the morning and late at night, dependably all day, every day, on the weekend, 7 days a week. Those are the characteristics that productive transit services have. That's what the red line is proposed as.
And in terms of traffic congestion on College, if you hang around after, we'll fill you in on that. That was a little more of a complex answer that's already been covered.
Why don't you just increase the bus service right now to see if it works?
That's what the Marion County Transit Plan is.
No, I
it
mean, before
directs-
you do this red line stuff, why can't you increase the bus service right now?
So that was also
Maybe
covered
maybe
earlier.
20
There's
minutes like you want to do.
the operational costs are a local responsibility. The rapid transit routes are taking advantage of federal grant opportunities to build infrastructure where we can actually carry lots of people cheaply. So there's a disconnect there between
I'm
the.
just trying to take out of the equation. I want to know if it's going to work. I want to know if people are going to actually ride it if you increase the service like you're proposing. And what he just said.
There's lots of data to support that people.
Yeah, have a dry run for 6 months. Like he said, there's nobody riding the buses now. So you spend hundreds of millions of dollars doing this, and then, for what, 3 more people to ride it? Possibly? I don't know.
You guys, I think these guys have done they've come out, they've done a good job. They have stated that this meeting is for the referendum, not for the red line. We have 4 meetings coming up. So if all of you would just take this as note, as it applies to the referendum, if you make $40,000 a year, $8 a month for the rest of your life in taxes is going to increase. If you make $60,000 a year, it's just about 15. If you make 90, you're paying close to $20 a month extra to taxes for the rest of your life as long as you live here. You choose whether to vote for that referendum or not.
Okay, we have one last question from Councilor Oliver. He's been waiting a very long time. Sir?
Yes, thank you, Colin. First, I just want to acknowledge that I've heard a lot of good questions asked, a lot of questions yet to be asked. But I want to acknowledge our former Councilor Joyce Sanders, the Honorable Councilor Sanders. Thank you for being with us this evening. And of course, Councilor Bob in the back and Leroy Robinson, they're here also. Thank you all for coming out. A question that was handed to me by one of my constituents, and that is the congestion. We already have a gridlock, I believe it's at 52nd and College. It's already there. The construction, will we lose any lanes there and or parking spaces in the 51 to 5200 block on College Avenue?
So those intersections get a dedicated left turn lane. So the left turns would be out of traffic. They would have a straight through lane for traffic with a signal that's timed with the other signals, and they'd be able to be a straight through and right. So yes, there would be a loss of a northbound lane in all of those sections. The more fundamental conversation here is I think there's kind of unanimous agreement here that College Avenue is facing congestion, particularly at peak hours. The interesting thing there is as we look at other cities and other rapid transit lines, businesses do better when they have more access, more transit access, more service, more access to market. Businesses survive on market area and access from market area. It's interesting when you go and visit Cleveland or Chicago or Minneapolis or any of the cities that have implemented a line like this and you talk to the business owners, the vast majority of them are doing better when the service is there. One of the things fundamentally, we talked about geometry just a second ago with autonomous vehicles, but one of the things that transit helps do fundamentally is helps an economy function beyond the point where congestion would choke that economy out. And part of the conversation that we have to have here is that there are parts of this city that are at that tipping point where there is going to be new development in Midtown. There's going to be new development on Washington Street and downtown. Regardless of what happens with the transit referendum, they're happening because there's market for it, there's demand for it. Developers have no role in developing this transit plan, but serving constituents with options, with transportation options, is important, and being able to allow businesses to flourish and these areas to continue to grow economically, even after the point where congestion says, I don't go there anymore because it's horrible, is really an important part of that equation. And that's part of the fundamental reason that these rapid transit corridors work as well as they do.
Yeah, while we're waiting for another question from me, can we have it put on the screen about the location? Thank you very much.
Yeah, can we?
Again, the loss of parking spaces on College Avenue, do any of them involve residences?
I would imagine so, but you'd have to look at the detailed maps. I'm not sure.
Isn't it 300 feet on either side of where there's a station? Am I correct?
It's all public right of way. There's no right of way taking in front of residences. It's within the curbs.
And 38th Street from Meridian over to College. Will any lanes be lost?
Yes. Yes.
One each way.
Brian, you know the answer to that question. I don't have the plans in front of me. It's a good red line question for the red line meetings.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Isn't the...
East-west lanes on 38th Street from Meridian to College.
I don't believe that there is a dedicated through lane. I think that there is a treatment at each intersection. It's what's called a queue jump. So it's a segment of a dedicated lane that allows the bus to get some priority. I haven't looked at the plans in a while, but please come out to one of these meetings.
Yes.
Would you send me a drawing of those plans, please?
Absolutely.
And
They're actually on the web at indigo.net/redline. The detailed plans for the whole corridor are on there.
My question, isn't it 300 feet on either side of the station is the parking restriction? Isn't that the right figure? 300 feet.
It could be. We can talk afterwards. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Another good question for the red line meetings.
Yep. Thank you all for being here. I hope this answered a few questions, and there's a lot more opportunities to learn. This is an ongoing discussion. There's many more questions to ask and many more answers. So thank you. Have a great evening.